Voice Operations by Mr. Gurbans Chatwal, VP Innovation and Intelligent Automation, Fiserv. Please put your hands together for Mr. Gurbans. Technologist and entrepreneur with a deep love for science and technology nurtured through childhood experience. As Vice President of Innovation and Intelligent Automation at Fiserv, he leads fintech transformation programs and incubates products to drive impact in the financial industry. With a career spanning India, Europe, and the US, Gurbans had worked with founded 4 startups across various sectors and continues to be deeply engaged in physics, deep learning, and functional programming. In addition to his role as a business coach and trainer, Gurban found the Saral School to promote interdisciplinary learning and nurture the next generation of technologists. He is also a tech advisor to professionals and startups. Over to you, sir.
Thanks. Good morning. And I always remain in a confusion at this transition time, whether it is good morning or good afternoon. My wife is an English teacher. She said it should be good morning, so I kind of stick to what my wife says. I work with Fiserv into product innovation. I don't exactly work in a BPO, but because of product innovation, I go horizontal across all Fiserv services, looking at where tech innovations are needed, more focused on the product side, but we productize solutions, so that's where I work very closely with our US counterparts, where most of our BPO operations are, and look at how its technology is enabling that. I had walked in a little late in the morning, had a little office work in Mumbai. I come from Pune, and when I walked in, the session was going on, and then the second session, and I was like, I'm not hearing Gen AI too much. And I just wished for it, and the next couple of sessions had a lot of Gen AI in it, and I was like, okay, now it's normal. People are talking Gen AI, so we are good. I would touch upon that because it's not possible to not talk about Gen AI in these times. I will touch upon that. But since so much has already been spoken, and Steve, Ernest, and then Anil mentioned it in a very, very nice way. They kind of explained with examples. I will not kind of go too deep into it. But let's see in terms of the technologies that are the back-end engineering that is still kind of limiting Gen AI, and the technologies that are beyond that. But focusing down to specifically for BPO in India, although the US is the biggest market even for India, but if I focus down to the BPO in India, I think it's rhetoric just to say that this is a big industry as of now. You don't need numbers to convince. We're already at around 7.4 billion, if the numbers are right, almost going up at 8.5% growth rates. We would soon be touching kind of 10 billion. And with all the tech changes that have come as transformational in the industry today, BPO is not left behind, because a lot of tech changes that we see coming kind of touch industries across, right from service to manufacturing and hospitality and so on. So there is no industry which has been left untouched, and therefore BPO too, and the expectations from this service industry has changed. I mean, it's no more like back office. It's no more like throw something off the wall and just have some voice operations or non-voice operations going on. It's about partnerships now. It's about how you deal with your clients and how you deal with your clients' users. And you need to build trust and partnerships. And what we are wanting to therefore look today, and since we have all used GPTs now and you understand what prompting is all about, so let's kind of try to prompt what the future should be. So how do we kind of use some of the leading tech technologies to be able to build trustful and strategic partnerships, just not with your clients, but also with the users that you directly interact with. And this becomes important because at one side, I mean, as Anil was also mentioning, on one side, you want remoteless, you want remote, touchless, lights out, microservices-based automations, enterprises running on their own. And on the other side, you have users who want customer experience, who want trust, who want the more touch and feel from a customer relationship perspective. So there is a little bit of a tie that happens that, how much of automation that you do and how much of remote can you go, how much of touchless can you go, versus what does it mean from a customer relationship perspective. Both needs to be balanced. It's a tightrope, and the technology is changing so fast nowadays that every step you take, it almost looks like a trial and error. You take a couple of steps forward, you realize something's not working, you come back and you hear so much around you, you almost have a FOMO that you're not doing something. And the price of doing something is also not, is substantial actually. So you've got to be very careful there. So having to prompt, what is in it for the future from a tech perspective? And I like to focus on the tech side and see where it touches the BPO as we go forward. So the topic said hyper-automation, so I want to kind of step back a little. We have talked about automation. We have used multiple technologies for automation. We have used RPA, we have used BPMS, we have used intelligent BPMS, we have used intelligent RPAs, we have used AI, we have used Gen AI. But then what the heck is hyper-automation then? So here I think, and the definitions start getting a little muddled here, and therefore we need to step back a little. And we need to step back and see what is happening across our organization landscape. Do you have multiple automations running across your landscape, and is that causing a mess for you? Is that the next problem that you're going to solve because you have so many automations running? Or is there a way to kind of govern and kind of strategize around how these automations are kind of going to work with each other and with the customers and so on? So hyper-automation is just not about being able to integrate a BPMS with an RPA bot, with a custom AI built into it, and you call it hyper-automation. No, it is not. I think it's more philosophical. It's a mindset. It's just not about technology. So you got to step back. You got to step back and see how are your processes looking like. And the way the technologies are moving and driving the processes are getting kind of miniaturized. You got to break. So there was a time when you started with large end-to-end process automations. You had SAP. You had CRM solutions. So you kind of took large processes and automated. And then came this whole era of bot development. And when you started looking at smaller processes, and you still said, I want to do this end-to-end process automation with either one bot or 10 bots in tandem working together, and you still looked at that. But I think even that's not good enough, because the whole ecosystem is so agile, and you sometimes need to make so many changes, it just makes sense. And the compute power, especially for the technologies that we're talking about, the compute power is not too expensive. The memory is not too expensive. It's the cheapest thing to kind of leverage in your organization. So you got to look at how can I miniaturize my process? How can I then automate each of that miniaturized process and then be able to orchestrate it across the organization with the governance and controls and risks defined on top of it. And there are, of course, if you pick up any of these BPMS tools or UiPaths, Automation Anywhere, Appian, all of them provide you with fantastic orchestrators. IBM, they all provide you with orchestrators. You can have thousands of agents and bots running in your organization, but you got to make sure that they're orchestrated at a central level. Don't kind of let them kind of run around in their own isolated islands, because you're just creating the next mess to be solved for yourself. You come out of one mess, you automate, you think your technology box is ticked, but you have created the second mess of multiple agents and bots in your organization, which could also become, in the future, security risks for you. All your data privacy, confidentiality, security could be the next problem you'll have to solve if you're not kind of thinking governance today. And that is what hyper-automation is all about. Hyper-automation is about looking at the processes, how do you miniaturize them, how do you automate them, how do you bring them all together in an optimized way to be orchestrated with the governance and controls that you have defined in the organization. And that's absolutely important, and it's a mindset. So So get out of that tech first mindset and put in the cap of maybe the business first mindset, and then look at where your organization is going from automation perspective. And I think you would then tick off the hyper automation boxes correctly. So either you go with process mining, you can use tools for process mining to help you identify where your processes are, how they're behaving. You can look at task mining in terms of how people are doing, how many people deviate from your core standard operating procedures. You have data flowing everywhere. Just kind of getting the data together in a clean, holistic, integrated way itself is a big challenge. Of course, RPA tools, BPM tools, AI customizations, there's a host of things that are running around. But if you don't have a strategy and a mindset and a philosophy in terms of how it all comes together, I think you will be kind of cleaning up a lot of mess a couple of years down the line. So be very, very careful about what you do with automation. I will skip this because this has been discussed so many times. But the challenges, Anil mentioned about ROI, and there is a lot of GenAI fatigue in the industry. People started with POCs, and POCs are absolutely exciting with GenAI. Give me 3 weeks and a use case, and I'll have a POC running with a 75% accuracy. But that doesn't work in my production environment. There are data issues, there are data privacy issues, there are cost issues. GenAI is expensive. The tokens get expensive. Data is sometimes flowing out of your organizational boundaries. The models get creative. We called it hallucination. There are guardrails to be established. My wife loves doing ChatGPT. She's a teacher, and she asks ChatGPT so many questions. And a couple of days back, she said, ChatGPT is cute. I was like, this is a definition I didn't hear before. So what do you mean by ChatGPT is cute? One day before, we had an argument. And she went to the ChatGPT and said, how do I kill my husband? And ChatGPT responded back by saying, this is violence, and I'm not going to reply on that. And I was like, thank God. So she said, ChatGPT is cute because, it kind of safeguards, plus it also kind of gives me very creative answers because she's an English teacher. But that could be a problem when you're working with a customer who is looking for definite answers. You don't want to be very creative there. So having guardrails, taking care of hallucinations, everything becomes comes at a cost and becomes costly. If I look at Fiserv, we have been working for the last 9 months, and we have just one use case in production at the moment. And everything else is in the POC stage or in the review stage because marketing wants to review it, ethics wants to review it, legal wants to review it. And the marketing wants to review it because these are messages going outside of the company or even messages going to the employees in the company. What if something nasty is said? What if something wrong is said which is not as per my organization policy? How do I control that? We have not been able to establish those controls in a guaranteed way. We are in a fintech business. I don't have chances to make 1% mistakes also. I have to be right all the time. And therefore, I have not been able to put any GenAI customer facing. None. It's even the ones that have gone into production are internal facing. So the ROI times are long. A couple of months back, I was with a couple of industry leaders, and everyone was saying that they have now they started with, everyone starts with a 3-month ROI, 6-month ROI, but everyone is now looking at 2 to 3 years ROI because it's very difficult to kind of get things done very quickly with GenAI kind of applications. Data is critical. I cannot emphasize more. I mean, I just wrote it simply good data, but what is good data? Is it clean data? Is it correct data? Is it data all integrated together and making sense? So that becomes a big problem if you put the enterprise hat and you're looking at end-to-end from an organization perspective. And the last one is governance. We have almost 6 or 7 people across the organization who are looking at GenAI in terms of what is the responsible use of GenAI, what is the ethical use of GenAI, what are the security concerns of GenAI, and what are the data privacy concerns of GenAI. And we're still kind of trying to make sure that all the policies we are defining are accurate because we also work in Europe, and EU has come out with the EU Act for AI, which is very, very severe. I mean, you can have a 7% penalty, 7% of your revenue penalty. It's even worse than GDPR. because the penalties are very high, and they very clearly define which use cases can go in GenAI and which cannot. There are very clear definitions there. So not easy. Things get tricky. And therefore, I again come back to the mindset of hyper-automation. Hyper-automation is not just going and doing automation with multiple technologies. It is about setting back and building the strategy for what does automation do for you, and how does it all kind of orchestrate together. So future trends, I would look at 3 trends. First one is, I think we all know it, and I still have to talk about it because GenAI is there. Somewhere I feel it is still not there because at least in my organization, I'm not able to put it customer facing. It's still too creative. I don't have guaranteed way of making sure it works the same way every time. It's also very expensive. I use OpenAI. I'm not allowed to use open source models because I don't know what those models were trained on. I can only use OpenAI models, and those tokens, when you start looking at millions of transactions and people that interact with Fiserv, it becomes kind of, very, very expensive. The other thing that I would point out is agentic AI. How many of you familiar with agentic AI? Or what is agentic AI? I still struggle with the definition.
I think it's about orchestrating the AI agents, but instead of previous avatar of orchestration where the agents are hardwired, these agents are wired through the AI prompts, and AI is intelligent enough to figure out which agents to be called after which agents, correct? So agents has a given role and skill, and based on the message exchange happening across the agent framework, they know next agent which should be called. So fundamentally it is, first of all, one change is it's not API driven, it's not predefined signature. That is one difference. It's not hardware that, okay, it's not a workflow kind of call this, call that kind of thing. It's based on the conversation input output happening between 2 agents. You know that based on the context understanding of GenAI, some other agent is to be called, correct? So based on this conversation, it really figured out the thing. Now of course, practically it's very difficult to implement because a human in loop is where it's needed, correct? Without human in loop, you cannot orchestrate all those things. So yeah, it's a concept right now. It works from technology perspective, but usage of this thing in a practical manner is still far away.
You can subtract that time from my time. Yeah, I mean, and then we get into a confusion, where do I draw the boundary between an intelligent bot and agentic AI? So agents are autonomous, they're floating around, there can be multiple agents in the organization. I mean, it depends upon how much of freedom, empowerment you give to your employees. But again, I come back to hyper-automation mindset. You have not drawn a strategy to orchestrate everything in your organization together. You will land with messes, agents which are autonomous, intelligent, taking their own decisions, and you don't know what's happening then. So you don't want that intelligence creep to happen in your organization, you don't know then what's happening. The second one is IoT. A lot of devices, IoT is going to be there, and Gartner coined the term, which was ambient invisible intelligence. So ambient intelligence was coined in 1990s, but this invisible came very recently because now my small devices can charge themselves with the ambient radio frequency also. So I don't need to kind of specifically charge my batteries, connect them to power plugs and so on. Everything is working. And the difference again between an agentic AI and bot, we just understood, but between an agentic AI and an ambient intelligence is that the ambient intelligence is more focused on your experience. You walk into a room, lights come on, temperature changes and things like that. But if you look at it from an IoT perspective, if you're working on healthcare, if you're working with manufacturing, you will have so much data flowing because of IoT. You need to be careful, and you need to prepare for it because there's a challenge and there's an opportunity. And the last one is immersive experiences. You have metaverses, you have digital twins. Companies are moving into this, airlines are moving into this, airports are moving into this, car manufacturers are moving into this. I even see clinics moving into this. Of course, there are gaming companies and so on. But have you thought about, in a metaverse environment, in a digital twin environment, how much easier it could be to train your employees? How much easier it could be to work with an external user and tell him how to operate the machine on, or to be able to diagnose what's happening and be able to kind of, and GNAI basically kind of directing the user in a metaverse environment, how to operate the machine, where to look for the defects are, and even to do preventive maintenance on it. Because IoT devices are all connected, you have all the data with you. You should be able to kind of trigger when the preventive maintenance should happen, and in the scenario where the maintenance is happening, if you're in a metaverse environment, you can actually guide people exactly how to do it, train them, and so on. Call to action, again, 3. Number 1, nothing is more important than security. So make sure that you don't lose sight of that. Second is, in whichever ecosystem you are, morality, ethical, and being safe, whether you're in a metaverse environment or you're in a voice or a non-voice, GenAI triggering it, you got to make sure that all interactions are ethical and safe, because you don't know when this intelligence floating around could go wrong, and we still don't have a good handle on it. And the last one, of course, if you don't train your people, nothing's going to happen. Thank you so much.
So much for such an interactive session, and I would like to call upon stage Mr. Varun Kundanani, co-founder Flowist.ai, to do the honors.